The US government wanted Luigi Mangione dead. The Attorney General herself signed off on pursuing the death penalty. And then a federal judge looked at the law, called her own conclusion tortured and strange, and threw the death penalty out anyway. That twist alone tells you everything you need to know about how complicated this case really is. But here is what nobody is explaining clearly. What actually happens now? What evidence does the prosecution have? And does Luigi Mangione actually have a chance of walking free? This is the Bench Report, and today we go inside the most talked about criminal case in America right now. Before we get into the courtroom, let's talk about who this person actually is, because the public image and the real story are very different. Luigi Mangione was born on May 6, 1998. He studied at the University of Pennsylvania, where he founded the university's first game development club, which grew to about 60 members. He later completed a robotics research internship at Johns Hopkins University and worked as a programming intern at Firaxis Games, where he worked on the video game Civilization 6. This is not someone who grew up in difficult circumstances or who had a history of violence. This is an Ivy League, educated, tech industry professional from a wealthy family. And that is exactly what made this case so shocking to so many people. On December 4th, 2024, United Healthcare CEO Brian Thompson was shot and killed in New York City. Following a nationwide manhunt, Mangione was arrested 5 days later in Altoona, Pennsylvania, at a McDonald's restaurant. What was found when he was arrested is what prosecutors are now building their entire case around. This is where the case gets very serious for the defense. When Mangione was arrested, his backpack contained a ghost gun, fake IDs, a notebook, and other writings detailing his grievances against the private healthcare system in the United States. A ghost gun is an untraceable firearm with no serial number. Fake IDs suggest premeditation and a plan to evade capture. And the writings, which prosecutors describe as essentially a confession explaining why he targeted the healthcare industry, are what the prosecution considers their strongest evidence. The judge ruled that the search of Mangione's backpack was legal, finding it fell within multiple exceptions to warrant requirements, including the discovery of the weapon and the likelihood that the evidence would have been discovered inevitably. That ruling is huge. The defense tried to get all of that backpack evidence thrown out. They argued the search was illegal. The judge disagreed, which means the jury is going to see the ghost gun, the fake IDs, and those writings. All of it comes in at trial. Think about what a jury sees when they hear someone wrote down their reasons for targeting a specific industry before a CEO of that industry was killed. That is not easy evidence to explain away. Now, here is the part that shocked everyone, including legal experts. Attorney General Pam Bondi directed prosecutors to seek the death penalty against Mangione in April 2025, marking the Justice Department's first attempt to do so in President Donald Trump's second term, calling the killing a premeditated, cold-blooded assassination that shocked America. So the full weight of the United States government was pointed at Luigi Mangione with the goal of putting him to death. And then something extraordinary happened in a federal courtroom. The defense argued that stalking fails to qualify as a crime of violence and therefore cannot be the predicate to make Mangione eligible for the death penalty if convicted of the federal charges. In plain English, here is what that means. For the federal death penalty to apply, the murder had to be committed during another crime that legally qualifies as violent. The government argued that stalking which is how they categorized Mangione tracking Thompson before the shooting, was that violent predicate crime. The judge disagreed, finding the stalking charges did not amount to crimes of violence and dismissed 2 counts in Mangione's federal case. The judge wrote that her conclusion may strike the average person, and indeed many lawyers and judges, as tortured and strange, and the result may seem contrary to our intuitions about the criminal law, but it represents the court's committed effort to faithfully apply the dictates of the Supreme Court to the charges in this case. A federal judge essentially said, "I know this seems wrong, but the law forces me here." That is one of the most remarkable statements you will ever read in a federal ruling. Mangione no longer faces the death penalty. He still faces 2 federal stalking counts, which carry a maximum sentence of life in prison without the possibility of parole. So he escaped death, but he is still looking at spending the rest of his life behind bars if convicted. Here is where things stand right now, and why this case is far from over. The federal trial in-person jury selection is scheduled to begin on October 5th, 2026, with opening statements starting on October 26th. That means this case is heading into a courtroom later this year, and the bench report will be covering every single development. But here is what makes this even more complicated. Mangione is not just facing one trial. He is facing cases in 3 separate jurisdictions: federal court in New York, state court in New York, and charges in Pennsylvania related to his arrest. The Manhattan District Attorney's Office is separately trying to convince a state judge to put Mangione on trial on July 1st, before the federal case. So there is a battle happening right now over which court gets to try him first, and that decision alone could dramatically change the outcome. And then there is the public opinion element that you simply cannot ignore in this case. A crowdfunding campaign has raised over $1.4 million for Mangione's legal defense as of January 2026. Donors have cited the politicization of the case, frustrations with the healthcare system, and due process concerns as their reasons for donating. There are people in this country who see Luigi Mangione as a villain, and there are people who see him as something else entirely. That division is exactly why jury selection in October is going to be one of the most watched legal proceedings in recent memory. Finding 12 people who have not already formed a strong opinion about this case in the age of social media is going to be a monumental challenge for both sides. Luigi Mangione escaped the death penalty on a legal technicality that even the judge called strange, but he is still facing life in prison. The evidence against him is sitting in front of a jury in October, and 3 separate court systems are fighting over who gets to try him first. This case is nowhere near finished. Subscribe to the Bench Report so you don't miss a single update as this trial moves toward October. And drop in the comments, do you think Luigi Mangione gets convicted? Let me know where you stand. This is the Bench Report. Court is adjourned.